Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another video. And today I will be comparing the Google Pixel 2 and the iPhone 10. And these two phones may not be in the same price bracket, I know that. However, I think that they're very interesting phones and I wanted to see how they stack up to each other because they're basically the best that Apple and Google have to offer. And the Pixel 2 is just as good as the XL when it comes to most things because the only real difference between the two is the display and the battery. Everything else is shared. So I think that the Pixel 2 can stand in for the Pixel 2 XL throughout the test. So keep that in mind and don't think that I'm just comparing the cheaper Pixel to the more expensive iPhone. The Pixel 2 XL is almost the same thing as the Pixel 2. So keeping that in mind, let's get right into the test and let's see how these two phones stack up to each other throughout a series of tests. So let's get right into it. So let's get right in and look at the physical aspects of both phones. So looking at it side by side, you can see that both the phones are very similarly sized. And when you put them on top of each other, they seem very similar. They have approximately the same body size, I'd like to say. The iPhone 10 is a little bit wider. The Pixel 2 is a little bit taller. So when it comes out to it, they both have a very similar size. Now, what does differ are the bezels. So the iPhone 10 has an almost full display, whereas the Pixel 2 does not. So that brings in a pretty big size variation between the displays. The iPhone 10 has the 5.8-inch screen. The Pixel 2 has a 5-inch display. And both of these displays are AMOLED, so you should expect something similar. However, when looking at it, you can see that both the phones have very different takes at them, and the Pixel 2 was pretty much known to have a very problematic display, especially when it came out. The Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL were bashed for their displays, and they've kind of improved, but I still think that they're not as good. Now, the main issue was that with them were that they had very dull colors. Now they do have a saturation mode change where you can change around the saturations of the phones, but I still don't feel like it has a accurate enough image as the iPhone does. So clearly I think that the iPhone has the better screen here between the two, and it has the bigger screen, so it is very much helpful. Now when we flip the phones around on the back, this is where we start to notice some differences here. The Pixel 2, it has this fingerprint scanner right here. Note that there is no fingerprint scanner on the iPhone 10. There is only a facial recognition system. While it is sophisticated, I very clearly prefer the physical aspects of a home button, a fingerprint scanner, because it's so much easier to set up and use all the time. Moving on to the camera, the iPhone 10 has a dual camera setup, which protrudes quite a lot from the phone. The Pixel 2 has a camera that's a single camera, which is kind of flat, and it protrudes just a little bit, but it's not at all obtrusive. And when you have the phone flipped on its side and you're trying to use it on a desk or something, it does not wobble. The iPhone 10, it does wobble, so that's something you have to keep in mind. But this isn't an issue if you have a case on the phone. Once you put a case on, the wobble does stop. And just looking at the back, the one thing that I don't like about the Pixel 2 is the use of these two different type of materials. I would have been a lot happier with just the glass or just this material. This is a coating of some sort on top of metal, which I'm not a fan of, to be very honest with you, actually. I'd rather prefer the glass. I know it would have affected durability, but I think that an all-glass design would have looked all better. The iPhone 10 does have a all-glass design on the back with a stainless steel frame, which is really good. It really does support durability when it comes to long term. However, I'm pretty sure you guys realize that glass backs have their own significant problems, and when it comes to drops, they aren't as durable. And looking around both the rest of the phones, on the right side of the iPhone, we have the vibrate switch, which lets you toggle silent or the ring mode, which allows you to silence calls without having to do much. The Pixel 2 doesn't have anything. On this side, it has the SIM card tray. The iPhone has the volume up and down button. At the bottom, both the phones have their charging ports right down in the center, so the USB-C for the Pixel 2. iPhone 10 has the Lightning port, and we have a mic and a speaker grill on the iPhone 10 at the bottom. Whereas on the Pixel 2, for the dual speaker setup, we have two speakers that are both front firing. This is a very good combination. especially considering that content is pushed towards us instead of towards the bottom on one speaker in the iPhone and towards the top. So dual speakers that fire towards you are always better than those that don't. And again, on the front, one key aspect of both these phones are the way they handle bezels. The Pixel 2 has these really large bezels on top and bottom, which I don't think look that good. The iPhone X has this notch. Both of them have been heavily criticized. However, I learned that dealing with a notch is a lot easier because in most cases what happens is that the notch hides as the status bar in most apps, and you don't have to really even think about it. It's only when you're watching these full screen videos or games where you actually realize that there's that notch that's persistent. The Pixel 2, however, it's always there. It's nothing you can do about it. So I really wish that the Pixel 2 didn't have these large bezels, but they're there and I can't do anything about them. And finally, looking at the right side, we have the SIM card slot over here for the iPhone. We have the volume rocker and power key over here on the Pixel 2, and this power key right here that doubles as the Siri button. And one thing I'd like to note is that the Pixel 2 seems to have very hard buttons, unusually hard buttons. And I thought it was just me at the beginning, and what I did was I asked a couple of my friends and my brother as well to try it out and let me know if it was just me. And almost everyone said that the buttons did feel unusually hard. So let me know if it's just my phone or your Pixel has the same issue. I don't really recall hearing many people talk about it, so it's a little bit weird. So when it comes down to the physical aspects of both of these phones, I very clearly prefer the iPhone X here because I feel like the design is a lot more neat and the materials used feel a lot better to me. Not to mention the display feels a lot nicer in comparison to the Pixel 2. One thing I do like about the Pixel 2 is the flat design on the camera right here. It really does make it look a lot nicer. And I also like the and I also like the fact that they did keep that fingerprint scanner, which is a good thing. There are some issues with it. That's why I don't think that it's the better of these two when it comes to the physical traits. So this one goes to the iPhone. Let's move on to the next part of this. All right, everybody, so let's get right into the software comparison. And this is a very tough one because the iPhone and the Pixel 2 are both the best phones available on each platform, in my opinion, and they showcase the best parts of both OSs. So Google makes Android and Google makes the Pixel 2, so obviously the Pixel 2 is going to have the best overall experience of Android. Apple makes iOS and they make the devices, so obviously this phone is going to have the best experience of iOS. And it very clearly, it comes down in the end, I think, to personal preferences. Some people like the Apple ecosystem more, some people prefer the Google ecosystem more, and I can see why you'd want to choose one over the other. And I think that when it comes down to it, there's a lot more that Google has done to this phone in terms of AI and software keys that the iPhone hasn't. Mainly such as the camera. The camera hardware may not be the most unique, but the software behind it that runs this camera is just a marvel. Photos come out so well, and you'll see in the photo comparison part of this test how well that camera really works. And not just the camera, it's very clear that the software does just as much to make this come out. And it really does keep proving to me again and again that software is actually a lot more important than hardware. One thing that the iPhone is a lot better at is app support and developers having a lot better versions of their apps available on the iPhone. So a lot of developers don't even bother with Android phones, first off. And the ones that do, they generally have to create a basic layout of most Android devices, which means that the app experience isn't as good as it could be. There's a lot of things that wouldn't take advantage of maybe the screen sizes of these phones, or they wouldn't take advantage of some particular key features that a phone may have. Whereas the iPhone, since there's not as many phones, developers do develop a lot more, and they make a lot more useful apps related to the iPhone, in my opinion. So the iPhone has the better app experiences. The Pixel 2 has the more advanced AI and features. And I think that when it comes down to Siri and Google Assistant, which a lot of people do use now thanks to these smart speakers and all, the Google Assistant is obviously better right now. It understands context so much better, and I do feel like Siri could be a lot better. And when it comes down to it, I think that there's a lot of gap between iOS and Android in some places, and the same could be said for Android and iOS. So I think that this has to be a tie. The software experiences will, at the end, it'll always boil down to which ecosystem you'd rather stay on, the Google or the iOS Apple ecosystem. And that's a tough call, and that only the individual users can make for themselves. All right, guys, let's move in from the software and transition into the benchmarks. So again, as I say it a lot of times, benchmarks don't really paint the full picture of how a phone performs, but it gives you a general idea of how the phone software and the hardware are optimized and how the overall phone is like. And comparing these two phones is quite interesting because they're very neck and neck in performance when you use them in real life, but benchmarks kind of show a different story. So this is the Antutu benchmark rating. I already ran the test, and the results for the Pixel 2 are 202,696. The iPhone 10 has 227,572. So from this result, you can see that the iPhone performed slightly better when it comes to the graphical aspects of this test. And the story kind of continues on a similar pace when you look at benchmarks. The numbers are really astonishing. The Pixel 2 scores an 1891 on the single core. The iPhone scores a 4216 on the single core. So that means it's more than double than what the Pixel 2 is, and by a pretty good margin as well. And the multi-core score, again, very close to double. So 6,250 versus 10,188. So it's very clear that Apple, when it comes to CPU, is just king of the hill. You really just can't rival with this A11 Bionic chip that's on the iPhone 10. It's just an amazing CPU. And the CPU benchmarks do highlight that. So let's move on and look at the internet speed network results. And the results are fairly consistent on both phones, except for a few variations here and there. The Pixel 2 has better download speed as far as I observed. However, as I repeated the test, I do the test 3 times. So the top 3 results on the iPhone here are the upload and download. I'm sorry, the download and upload. Same here with the Pixel 2 upload and download. These are all done at the same time. And you guys can see that the lower one is the first one, and as you come up is the newest result. And one thing that's clear is that the iPhone is a lot more consistent with the download speeds. However, it's a little bit lower than the Pixel. The Pixel did have higher download speeds, but it was a little bit inconsistent. Every time I ran the test, the score kept going lower. The upload speeds were very consistent and higher on the Pixel 2. Not so much on the iPhone. I don't know what was going on over there. Something was definitely up, but I think when it comes to networking, the Pixel 2 did do a lot better in comparison to the iPhone 10. So that covers the benchmarking test. And I think when it comes down to benchmarking, it's very clear that the iPhone had the lead here. And one thing I do notice is that the iPhone does perform a lot better in certain areas. And I do prefer using this phone a lot more because of that. The Pixel is no slouch. It runs very smoothly, and I've never had issues with it. But putting the two side by side, I personally felt like the iPhone did better. So the benchmarks I'll give to Apple. And let's move on with the audio test. So let's start off with the Pixel 2 and iPhone 10 on portrait mode on the rear cameras. So in this photo, when you look at things off the bat, both of them look pretty decent. The Pixel 2 definitely has a lot better color, and it's a lot less zoomed in, so that gives you a nice look. And I think that the Pixel 2 overall in this shot looks a lot better than the iPhone 10. Moving on, this is the front camera of the Pixel 2 and iPhone 10, both again portrait mode, and look at the difference. Just look at my hair on the iPhone 10, especially on the left side. You can see how it's blurred out, whereas on the Pixel 2, it's perfectly in view. And you guys can see how well the Pixel 2 does when it comes to blurring out the background and keeping me in focus, whereas the iPhone 10 struggles. Not to mention the colors and everything just look so much better on the the Pixel 2 in comparison to the iPhone 10. Here's another selfie in a little bit better light, and again you can see that the iPhone 10 makes the same mistakes, especially around my hair. For some reason the software isn't able to identify with my hair color variations, which should be pretty easy since I have dark colored hair. Pixel 2 does an amazing job. Just look at how well I am in focus and everything behind me isn't. Even the t-shirt, the edges around my t-shirt, when you zoom in, they look perfect, and I think that the Pixel 2, again, very clear winner here. Now here's a shot from the rear cameras of both the Pixel 2 and iPhone 10, and at first glance, they both look very similar, but looking more into detail, you can see that the Pixel 2 has better colors, especially when looking at the wall in the background. You can see that one missing patch of paint. That looks a lot clearer on the Pixel 2, whereas the iPhone 10 overexposes it a little bit. The details as well on the tree look a lot better in comparison to the iPhone 10 just because of that contrast. Now this shot is again from the rear camera. It's a little bit of a different setting. There's more light in this photo. And one thing I see, the main key difference is that the Pixel 2 is a lot warmer. iPhone 10 is a lot cooler. Details seem to be very similar. Both the cameras did a good job here with exposure and everything. So I think this one's a tie, but personally I prefer the cooler color, so I'd prefer the iPhone 10 in this case. And I think that maybe some people might prefer the Pixel 2. Now this shot is a little bit more difficult to gauge because this is again a shot from both the rear cameras, but when you look at the Pixel 2, you can see that the colors are a lot darker, especially looking at the leaf on the bottom left corner of the photo. You can see in comparison to the iPhone 10, it does a good job of giving somewhat of a cinematic photographic appearance, with the half of the leaf being very dark and the other half being nice and poppy with the contrast, whereas the iPhone 10 does a little bit more of a real-to-life job. When it comes down to it, I think that the Pixel 2 photo looks a little bit better, but if you're looking for something more accurate, the iPhone 10 is definitely the more accurate of the two photos. So here's another camera shot from the back of the iPhone and Pixel 2. And this one is very close in terms of detail. However, it comes down to exposure and the contrast of these two. The exposure on the iPhone 10 is higher, which allows the colors to pop a little bit more. Pixel 2 is a little bit more subtle, and the colors look a little bit less bright in comparison to the iPhone 10, especially when comparing the pink of these two flowers. Personally, I think I would take the iPhone 10. However, the Pixel 2 looks a little bit more real to life in this photo. Now here's a similar shot to the last one, and the Pixel 2's lack of overexposure kind of helps it here because you can see a lot more detail in that flower now, whereas the iPhone 10 kind of kills some detail and information because of that higher exposure. And I think that overall, when coming down to it, I like the photo of the Pixel 2 better here because of the way the photo looks a little bit more natural. So here's another photo, and looking at this photo, why I'm showing you guys so many photos of the back camera here is to show you guys how well the Pixel 2 adapts based on the situation, whereas the iPhone 10 gives more consistent results. The software on the Pixel 2 helps it judge scenes, and look at the way that it's handled this scene. Now, when you look at the iPhone 10, everything looks bright, and just look above the leaf, the brown leaf. You guys see that it's so exposed that you can't see anything behind it, whereas you can see everything behind the leaf on the Pixel 2's photo very clearly, and that's something that I really do appreciate about the HDR Plus mode of the Pixel 2. It just really makes photos like this look very good, and whereas the detail, on the iPhone 10 is there, it's a little bit brighter, but I think when you look at it, the Pixel 2 has just so much more focus on everything in the environment and not just that main subject. So the Pixel 2 really does a good job, and it goes to show what the software of this phone really does to those cameras. So rounding out the test, I just want to show you guys a without blur and with blur effect on these two photos from the Pixel 2 and iPhone 10. So this is the Pixel 2. You guys can see how the blur effect looks like. It looks very good. It's done very neatly. And the selfie came out fairly well on both sides. I would not mind posting either of these on social media. Here's a same shot of an iPhone 10 from the same position, and one thing you guys can clearly note off the bat is how poor the photo on the right looks because of how horribly my hair is cropped out. Look how natural the photo on the left looks because there's no blur effect, whereas the one on the right looks like it's not really good. It's blurred out my hair weirdly, and I think that Apple really needs to step up its game on the front portrait mode because it just doesn't work as well as you'd hope for it to, especially when you compare it to the Pixel 2. Alright everybody, so this is the test of the the Pixel 2, Google Pixel 2 on the left, and the iPhone 10 on the right. So the Pixel 2 has the 4K 30 FPS video running right now, iPhone 10 4K 60 FPS. So right off the bat, I think I'm going to give it to the iPhone just because it has 60 FPS. And you guys can't see this right now, but while I'm recording this 4K video, the Pixel 2 is getting very hot, and it is dropping frames on the video preview. But I'm sure in post it'll be fine. But still, I think that the iPhone takes it clearly here. But let's see in post what it looks like. Alright everybody, so here's a little bit more of an equal comparison with both the Pixel 2 XL on the left and iPhone 10 on the right. On 1080p, 60 FPS. Let me know what you guys think about the quality and the colors and everything. Stabilization as well, because that is important on phones nowadays because we do use them a lot. So stabilization is very important to me. Let me know what you guys think. I'm walking around. I'm not trying to be gentle or stable. I'm just shaking it quite a lot. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Hey guys, so again, same test. Pixel 2 on the left, iPhone 10 on the right. Let me know what you guys think about the front camera. Both are on their highest possible settings. And let me know what you think about detail, quality, audio, all that stuff. And which one would you guys take video on if you had to use the front camera for video? iPhone 10 or Pixel 2? Let me know down in the comments below. Alright everybody, this is the camera comparison test of the Google Pixel 2 and the iPhone 10. The Pixel 2 is on the left, the iPhone 10 on the right. Both are on 4K. The Pixel 2 is on 30 FPS, iPhone 10 is on 60 FPS, and this is a low light setting, so this is my office, and the lights are pretty dim inside, so let me know what you guys think about the quality and how the image looks. I can't tell much from the way on the display of these phones, but I will know more once I have them exported, so let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Alright guys, so this is again a test of the front cameras on video, and both are on 1080p. What I can tell right off the bat is that the iPhone 10 looks like there's a lot more detail. Just look on my face, you can see that there's a lot more detail of colors, and there's a few pimples that you can very clearly see. The Pixel 2 seems to wash it all out and give me a very artificial color, is what I'd like to say. So let me just move around over here. Let me know what you guys think about this. I'm not sure. I think that the iPhone 10 looks better, but I won't know until it's in post. So that's all the tests I had, and now let's move on into the final verdict of this comparison. And let me just summarize everything really quickly here. So the iPhone 10 costs $999, Pixel 2 starts at $649 and goes up all the way to $949 for the top end Pixel 2 XL. Now, why I keep mentioning the Pixel 2 XL is because it has almost all the same things as the Pixel 2. The only differences between the two are the display and the battery size. Now, the display is nothing to brag about on the Pixel 2 XL, so I mean, I don't really consider it too heavily. Now, the one thing that I will say is that the base Pixel may be a decent deal, but the Pixel 2 XL in the highest variant is $949, and I particularly don't think that that's exactly worth it. Now, the iPhone 10 is no bargain either. It's definitely very expensive. However, one thing I'm starting to kind of realize and accept now is that these are premiumly priced products, and we have to pay a certain premium to have the newest, best from both Apple and Google. However you consider it or slice it, dice it, they are the kings of the technology world right now. And if you want a product from them, you're gonna have to pay a slight premium over everybody else. So from the beginning, the first comparison we did was a physical test where I felt that the iPhone 10 was the clear winner. I felt the materials used were better and overall had just a better feel to it. Then we move on into software, where I said that the software was a tie. Again, it all comes down to whether you want the Google ecosystem or the Apple ecosystem. And There's a lot of people who would interchange between the two, and for them, this decision could be either way. So again, I feel like this is an all-in-all a tie. So software comes down to a tie. Then the next test I ran was a benchmarking test, and in that, the iPhone X clearly won. And even when I compared it, in my case, to the real-world usage I did, I felt like the iPhone X did a little bit better. The Pixel 2 wasn't bad in any way. However, the iPhone X just did a little bit better. The next test was the audio test. Now, this is something that I was conflicted about. When I was listening to the phones without any data or anything about them, I personally felt like the iPhone X sounded better. However, when I did a few more comparisons, I used the decibelometer. I found out the exact decibels that the speakers were putting out on the same exact song. The Pixel 2 clearly emerges the winner. One, mainly because it has the higher decibel count on the test. So it was just a little bit better than the iPhone X, not by much, by 1 decibel. And the main reason I'm going to give it the crown for the audio test is because both the speakers are front firing. The iPhone X has 1 front firing speaker and 1 downward firing speaker. So I think that for that reason alone, the Pixel 2 kind of wins the speaker test. Then we come to camera. Now camera, I was actually kind of expecting it to be a one-way win for the Pixel 2. I knew that the iPhone just can't keep up with the level of software that the Pixel 2 has behind it. However, one thing that came clear to me is that while the Pixel 2 is really, really good at photography, still photography is amazing. Not to mention that the portrait modes on both the front and back are unreal. The AI and the technology that just goes into that is mind-blowing, and the results speak for themselves. Where the iPhone gives it stiff competition is the video. So in videography, the iPhone X has 4K 60 FPS recording, which the Pixel 2 does not, and it has 1080p 240 FPS slow-mo recording. So that's very high slow-mo recording and very high quality, and that means that you can get some very interesting shots in slow-mo. Now, the thing again with that comes down to be that it doesn't counter for how well the Pixel 2 does in video as well. I mean, the videos aren't bad on the Pixel 2 at all. They just don't stack up to the iPhone in my comparison, but just because of how Google is able to use technology to further improve their cameras every day, and the lack of the iPhone actually doing anything more with those cameras, the portrait mode mainly, why I don't think the iPhone deserves any camera awards right now, is because the front selfie portrait mode can be so much better, but Apple hasn't updated it. It's not anywhere close to the level as Google, so that kind of made the decision a lot easier for me. So the camera comparison, that goes to the Pixel 2 as well. Now, if you guys were keeping count, that means that both of these phones are tied. The camera and the audio went to the Pixel 2, the hardware and benchmark went to the iPhone X, and the software was a tie. So what it comes down to now, again, I think between these two phones has to be, 1, how much you value cameras, and 2, which ecosystem you want to be in. If you're going to be using your camera for a lot more still photography, the camera of the Google Pixel 2 is probably the better choice. If you're going to be doing a lot of video and shooting a lot of videos on your phone, the iPhone does a lot better because of the variations of modes it provides and the 4K 60 FPS that the Pixel 2 doesn't. And the last one is software. So software, whichever ecosystem you prefer, is something that I feel like you'll always gravitate towards. And for me, I think the personal call for me here would be to go with the iPhone X. And I'll tell you why. The iPhone X has a very good display, and one of the best, I'd like to say. Now for me, a display is the most important part of a phone. That's what you look at constantly when you use the phone. That's the most important part of a phone. And if a company can't nail the display, I feel like it really does miss out. And I start to not like the phone as much. I'm willing to forgive a lot of things if the display is really good, and I've noticed that, and that's kind of my bias as well. So do keep that in mind when I say this, that this is my own personal opinion. I think that if a phone has a good display, there's a lot of stuff that I'm willing to ignore when it comes to personal preferences. I'll point them out to you guys, but personally, I think that I can ignore some stuff. Now, the display on the Pixel 2, while it has improved significantly, I still don't think that it's up there anywhere close to the iPhone X. So when it comes to a personal level, I think that the iPhone X is the better phone. However, when you look at it with just data and the specs and the results of all the tests, I think that both the phones are equal to each other, and the one thing that the Pixel 2 does have in its advantage right now is that it is cheaper than the iPhone X. So if price is something that you guys are thinking about a little bit more, the Pixel 2 is probably the better choice. So that wraps up this comparison, guys. It was a very interesting one, and I honestly didn't expect the results to be this close. I expected both the phones to do well in their own areas, but I didn't expect everything to just turn out the way it did. Very interesting to see what happened. And I'm looking forward to doing a lot more comparisons like this. So be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like that, guys. I will be working on a lot more comparisons with both the iPhone 10 and the Google Pixel 2. And if you guys want to see anything more related to these phones, do let me know down in the comments below. Also, be sure to check me out on social media. I upload all the behind the scenes stuff, which I think that you guys don't want to miss out on. So all the links are down in the description below. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.